10, we get to set the agenda after a fantastic round 10. Oh, you got to say, look at the ladder and to be only a win and a half between second and 10th. You just know that there's going to be some great contests coming forward. But the first thing for me that I want to highlight, and we got a bit of feedback on the texts over the last couple of weeks that we weren't giving Sydney enough love. Well, they just keep getting it done. They're 2 games clear at the top, and their coach deserves as much credit as anyone. They completely unpacked, outworked, and rendered absolutely useless the Carlton side. They couldn't move the ball, they couldn't get field position, and they really couldn't put a dent in Sydney's armour. The thing that I'm loving about Sydney, yes, they've got guns in the middle. Warner, Goulden, Heaney have had outstanding years, Heaney in particular. And if it's not one of them, it's the other. And if it's not the other, it's all of them at the same time. Blakey off the back is a gun. But the people that they have added to their organisation have made a difference. We heard a lot about Grundy and Adams before the season began, but Jordan's last couple of weeks has been huge.
Yep.
So they've got guys that can go and attack the game and go and win the ball and make plays. But then they've got pretty much a plethora of players who can go and do jobs for them. Jordan's come into that mix. Rowbottom's an underrated player. He lent in on Cripps, who's a much bigger player around stoppage, and just made every one of Cripps's possessions contested, which he's pretty comfortable in that space. But Rowbottom was able to go the distance for 4 quarters and finish with a goal himself. Yeah, if it's not that, it's Cunningham off the back. We know that Fox has come in and out of the side. Longmire's philosophy is that if players are fit and ready, they play. They've played the least number of players this year, 27 players used only, and they've had the most number of players that have played every game, 16. So they are a settled team, which begs the question, what happens with Luke Parker? What happens? Callum Mills is their skipper. Oh, he's going to come back into that side, and they also had Tom McCartan sitting on the sidelines. So their back line of Francis, who's come in, from another club, Melican, who played a really good role and basically put Mackay to sleep, and Rampy. They're 3 what you would class as undersized key defenders that did the job extremely well. But Sydney they've done it the same way for a long period of time. He's coached. I'll talk about it later. He's coached through a dip at different times, but he's been one of the most successful coaches over a long period of time, and Sydney have been one of the most successful clubs over a long period of time. They've got a great team on their hands.
Amazing what they're doing. Percentage of 154. Next best is actually the Western Bulldogs on 126. That shows the gap in their performance. 2 games clear, and the one game that they lost unbelievably to Richmond, of course, a little bit earlier on in the season. Tell us about the Cats and the fallout to that smashing on Thursday night.
Yeah, well, they've lost 3 in a row, but we're talking about another coach who is at the top in terms of winning percentage. But there was some criticism around their resting players, and I want to address that after hearing from Chris Scott after the post-match. Geelong lost 3 games 3 times in a row, 3 times last year. It's the only time that Chris Scott coached Geelong side has lost 3 in a row. Those 3 last year, and now they're in the whole 3 games. So a Geelong GWS matchup, which a month ago looked like there was going to be the 2 best and informed teams in the competition. They go down.
So tell me about
with a must-win game.
Tell me about the resting of players. I'm not sure. I certainly spoke about it on Friday. It wasn't necessarily criticism. It was more, do you now question that strategy, considering how important top 4 is? Now, we all just assume that Geelong, with their start to the season, were going to finish top 4. Now that is in danger, with just looking at the ladder, even though they're still 3rd, do you now readjust that strategy and you go, okay, we just have to play our best 22 that are available to give us the best chance to actually qualify?
Well, I don't think you can argue with the philosophy, because you can't judge it on week by week, which is ironic in some ways, because Chris Scott's mentor, Lee Matthews, was a coach who coached and played for this week only. You must win this week. So John Longmire's philosophy is more closely related to Lee Matthews than Chris Scott's is. Chris has always been happy to flick his players. He came up with that philosophy rotated them through. They've used 32 players this year, and only 9 players have played all games, and only St Kilda and Richmond have less players that have played every game than Geelong. So it's a real clear philosophy to rotate players. So Hawkins, the conditions probably weren't going to suit him. Duncan's rested, Stanley's rested. Obviously, Jeremy Cameron probably would have played, but missed with concussion.
To Koning, I don't know what happened there.
But on the flip side, you got to. It happened so the Gold Coast Suns. That now it was a 5-day break, but they rested and managed their list to their best intent as well. So Witts goes out, Moyle comes in. Holman, who's a heart and soul player, goes out for Swallow. Walter, who they're loving, Sam Day comes in and plays those roles, and Rogers, who's a small forward, goes out, and Humphreys, who was played deliberately as the sub in that first game, to come in and have a better impact, in the second game of that batch up in Darwin, comes out and kicks 5 goals, and was exceptional. So I don't think I think we can criticise it when it doesn't come off in the short term, but I think building a deeper squad and a depth of capability and being able to play players in different roles and rely on players at different levels because other players aren't around them. I think ultimately it's the best way to go. And Geelong have been, and Chris Scott have been validated on that for a long time.
Schauffele just birdied the 10th. He's now dropped the outright lead. He's joint leader with Hovland on 18 under, and the Knicks have got it back to 8 in the East Semis Game 7.
Got momentum.
What about the Hawks?
That's exactly what I want to talk about, momentum in games. And, that game was exceptional. But one of the hardest things I reckon you ever have to do as a coach is go in and talk about a match that you've just lost that you actually had won for 98% of the game. And Sam Mitchell had to stand up and do that task yesterday. So last quarter, it was 23 insides to 4 goals to zip in the end. Contested possessions were plus 21 to Port Adelaide. Butters himself had 17 touches, 5 clearances. It was a huge last quarter. Burn-Jones, Rioli looked really dangerous. And I think the momentum was significant. The change was significant. The inside 50s ended up 48 each. Tackles were huge. It was a wet game, so 96 to 80. Contested possessions were even. The stats looked remarkably even when you looked at the end of the game. But obviously it was all Hawthorn early and all Port Adelaide late. When he references the last 45 minutes, I reckon he's referencing after CJ went off because Jath had run really hard. He'd been really a significant player. But once again, they're not looking at just this week. They don't want him re-injuring himself, so they have to make the move. Surely there was someone other than Blake Hardwick that could go behind the ball.
Well, he kicked 4 in the first quarter.
And five at early stage in the third quarter. 5
for the game, but throughout stages of that game, I mean, he did it in the second behind the ball, and then he was the one that went back there in the last quarter. So we discussed this. So Weddle was tagged by McEntee and held to his lowest rated game for the year. He had 8 touches. So Port Adelaide, once again, big tick after doing Stewart last week and McEntee have done Weddle. So he was completely out of it. Couldn't give them the spare behind the ball, and he's been playing on some good players. They didn't have Scrimshaw and they didn't have their captain, Sicily.
Yeah,
so I've got a bit of sympathy for Sam because we're looking through the lineup going, okay, who else can you put behind there? But then the counter view to that would be just do what you did for the majority of the game, hold your nerve, keep Hardwick forward and just play it out like you played it out for the first 3 quarters because it was a smashing. Like their contest work was unbelievable and Port Adelaide did not look like it. So as a team and as teammates, you go, okay, we're looking at Hardwick behind the ball. He's our most dangerous forward. What are we trying to do? Just save it. He always plays with his half forwards right up the ground.
Yeah.
They came really high up the ground. Ginnivan was coming up to the back as stoppage. Moore was in and around the ball. McDonald was right up. So every time they looked up, there was a play where Luke Bruce won the footy with about 4.5 minutes to go. All he's got is a Lear to kick to. So he's hesitant. So there are many mistakes.
But when you don't think that even with the coaching decisions that were made, you don't think that you're going to lose that game. Amon catches Rioli high with 40 seconds to go, and then Amon is the one that actually gets tackled. So he's not traditionally a defender. He's not traditionally an inside player. and he's been excellent to find some bite and some rebound off the halfback line with his use. But he's already a wingman that's gone back and played back. Mitchell is a wingman who's actually gone back. D'Ambrosio might have been a player that could have gone back. Will Day's already going to be your seventh if required. So he probably is one that could have gone back to the back line and move it forward up. But yeah, those questions only get asked when you don't make the plays, when you get the opportunity. And in that last 2 minutes, Hawthorn players had plays that they could have made. They didn't make them. They end up losing a game. So then you go back and you go, okay, well, why were we in that situation in the first place? But yeah, not a comfortable thing to do, to have to analyse or to put that in perspective. Given if you zoom out a little bit, the momentum of the Hawthorn side has been excellent through the last 5
They were
6
coming
weeks.
and they were coming hard. Also, their ball movement, they completely went into their shell as well. What about the Pies?
Yeah, you were there at the game.
Yes.
I went and had a look at it. Collingwood Adelaide games they just turn it on. So that's 12 points in the last 4 results, all Collingwood's way. 5 points, 1 point, 2 point, 4 points this one. And, it was just exceptional. And Craig McRae and the coaching and the Collingwood team are, as he says, really comfortable in this space. And I was sitting there with Brodie and I said, Collingwood have got a way of winning these and Adelaide have got a way of losing them or
So what does that say?
finding a way. It's just managing those moments. And I think it's a psyche as much as it's a belief before it's an action. And it's demonstrated one way or another. Riley O'Brien took a mark about 75 metres out with about 2.5 minutes on the clock.
I think there was 3:30.
Yeah, and it was a trigger hands, and Adelaide would trigger hand that 99 times out of 100, but it should have been the one out of 100 where he just went back because he's not a kicker. But if he'd have gone back and then just ended up chipping it back 20 metres to whoever, whether it's a Hinge who would normally run past or a Brodie Smith who would normally run past, and he's not an inexperienced player, and I'm sure it's coached, but you've got to be in those moments making the right decisions in those moments to believe that you can go and take that next step. But I thought that both teams were amazing. Rankin was huge, especially as the game sort of came to its end.
Collingwood's midfield in the first quarter was just that was the Harlem Globetrotters that we saw last year. So the
15 touches to Nick, 12 to Pendles, 12 to Josh.
It's 40, and De Goey had 10. There's 49 between those four, and just the synergy, the connection. That was the difference in the game. It was the start where Adelaide were slaughtered through the midfield early. Credit to them for fighting back. And they're a good side, the Crows, but just not good enough. The last free kick to Rankin, I mean, people losing their minds over this. How'd you see it against Rankin?
No, well, I think that we ended up putting and you can't do
the
this.
lab. You went to the lab.
It was 24.2 metres. So that's a fair way over 15 metres. But I know that listening to, I think it was Jared after the game, the next day, and he was talking about the fact that the umpires prefer to let it go. They don't want to call those. So I thought he was huge, and it just adds to the theatre. Like this game it's the best real time drama that we witness and we watch, and that's why we love it.
Better than Bridgerton. Harley, what'd you make of the Eagles?
I did get a text from Noddy 10 minutes ago. Nothing on the Eagles ? Well, here you go, Noddy. Although they were exceptional, weren't they? And there's a lot of folks in Harley Reid, and rightfully there should be. That goal, if you haven't seen it yet, go and have a look at the goal. Have a look at the double don't argue. One with the left, one with the right, coming out of the centre bounce. And he plays with such verve, doesn't he? Like even when he's bouncing that ball to go and kick the goal, he is loose as a goose. He's not concerned. He's not concerned at all about something bad happening or about the ball not quite bouncing. He is just absolutely
no fear,
confident in what he's doing, which is awesome. But the thing that I'm impressed with, and look, they've won 3 games, but and three of the 4 have come from, or 3 of the last 4 games at home they've won. So they're starting to win on their home deck, which is exactly what you need to do. But they're coming off a couple of horrendous years. And for Adam Simpson to be able to coach through that dip is really, meritorious, courageous. Obviously he's getting paid well, but he's been supported into And now you're on your way back up, and you've got a kid like Harley Reid who comes in amongst some really solid players that have been good players for a long time that for whatever reason had dropped away, and now they see this kid and a couple of others come, and they've got some hope, and they want to build again. McGovern, Barras, and Duggan down behind you put them in your back six, and Cole, who's played a lot of footy as well. They're experienced players who are really good at setting up the ground and intercepting, and then giving you opportunities to go back. Reid coming in supports Kelly and Sheed, and you don't have Yo in that mix as well. So that's a really good midfield to build from. Then you've got Jinby who comes in, who's a big body. You got a couple of other players through there that Chester's really showing a little bit on the wing now. Marrick's another one that's got some really elite foot skills. But then then you got to go forward and you got to kick a goal. Where's Jake Waterman come from?
Unbelievable.
So he's now Tom McDonald, who holds Jeremy Cameron 3 weeks ago, and he can't get a kick on him.
Yeah.
Best player in the competition, and Waterman is absolutely ragdolling Tom McDonald to take marks inside 25-30 and then lacing him out.
What he has done this year, he's turned into one of the most watchable forwards, almost a bit old school with the way he leads up at the football. Speak about competitive and wanting the football. He even missed a couple yesterday that he should have kicked. Could have been a bigger afternoon for him, but he's kicking bags every week. Right up there in the Coleman, even though he's missed a game or two. So love watching him play. He's just been enormous for them.
Yeah, look, and I think that, so all credit to Simo. I made the comment last year that I thought for his best interests that's going to be really difficult for him to coach through this to the other side, because you don't know when that trough is ever going to go. And you're delivering the message, you're setting the agenda, and it eventually you lose the edge, especially when you're dealing with players for a long period of time. Kevin Sheedy did it way back when. That was a different era. Damien Hardwick chose not to, and handed over. Had an opportunity to go to and handed it over. But there's Richmond are in a very similar position to what West Coast have been in for the last couple of years. They're having injuries. They're really thin with their squad. But Adam Uze, as a new coach, at least he has time to come in and do that. Coaching through the dip is hard, and Adam Simpson looks to be doing it pretty well.
How could you say that teams should tank? What will this do to the culture? I just wonder now how North Melbourne fans, and I'm particularly interested in listening to you, that round 24 win against Gold Coast, which they won by 35, was it worth sacrificing Harley Reid for that win? Bucks.
Hutchie's never been afraid to pop his head up and have it beaten around a little bit with unpopular opinions of the time. But that one's spot on, isn't it? I've always been down that philosophy of you don't build a winning culture by deliberately making it hard to win. But on those isolated occasions, and we would have our head in the sand if we didn't think that it has happened in the past.
Was it any different to what Geelong did last year? I mean, they, with about a month to go, put a number of key players in for surgery. And they're actually saying, well, this season's no good. We're not going to select our best 22 who are probably available if we want to push them to the line. Let's put the queue in the rack, get them operated on, come back with a full pre-season, get their surgeries done so they recover quicker. Is it any different to that?
And the tanking phrase could not really be used for that, but that's exactly you are managing. You're minimising your chances for success in individual games at the end of a year here to maximise your chance of being successful in the future. Whether it's one season ahead or 5 seasons ahead. But I thought Hutchie's argument was sound at the time. It's hard for us to hear that you're going to sacrifice the now for the later. It's hard for any supporter to acknowledge that, or even anyone. It shakes your foundation of what you think being authentic and doing your best looks and feels like. But it's prudent. It's prudent, and it would have been good business.
Hard to argue that Port Adelaide win that game without 6 and 6 yesterday. Bucks, what's your thoughts listening back to Sam Mitchell speaking prior to that game on Friday?
It's prophetic, isn't it?
Isn't it?
He the coaching that he talks about in terms of when it wasn't 6-6-6, there's 3 or 4 ways to score goals with 666. Of course there is. There's probably a myriad more ways to defend scoring of goals if it wasn't there, and that's what's been taken away. Do you if you've written that article, you know the stats. So has there been an increase and an uplift in scoring?
0.5 of a point,
right,
since that changes. So what you've gained with that 0.5 of a point, my argument is you've lost in any sort of strategy. Coaching, innovation, you're hamstringing the coaches a little bit with what they can do. I thought it was just as exciting seeing small forwards run off the back of the line or isolating a hot forward inside forward 50 and being able to do that, having your wingers in different positions. And yes, what comes with that is your ability to roll a winger back and a half forward up to protect the lead, which Sam Mitchell would have been able to do yesterday.
Did you want to see a result or a 30 seconds like that where you get, there's 25 seconds on the clock, you're 6-6-6, and you know that one team needs to score, and for the first time outside of transition, you've got an even numbered contest in front of the ball or behind the ball. Isn't that exactly what it's there for?
Yeah, so that's the one
you don't
you get, but you can still, not to say you can't score from centre bounce with the old rule.
No, but what you would have had is Hawthorn would have had 2 forwards, forward of the centre bounce. They would have had a wingman, maybe 2 guys on the wing to run in and to try and win that ball. And then you would have had 14 Hawthorn 10 Hawthorn bodies behind the ball, and with Port Adelaide matching them. So you would have kicked into a real heavy congestion if they'd have won the stoppage. I just reckon what we saw is exactly what you want to see. I think it is to take it out of the coach's hands and to reduce congestion into a part of the field where the game's going to be won or lost. I thought that was, and Hawthorn still had an opportunity. Amon could have shoveled it out with 6 or 7 seconds to go. Could have just shoveled it out towards the boundary line and taken it away from the face of goal.
But didn't we see Hawthorn?
I thought it was awesome.
Didn't we see Hawthorn do that anyway? Because once the centre bounce is finished, like I looked up at one point, there was a throw in just about 70 metres out from Port Adelaide's goal, and Hawthorn had 14 back inside forward 50. So they still tried to do that.
I understand, and that's what you do.
The momentum that was coming. So that's not to say that Port Adelaide still wouldn't have been able to score. They wouldn't have had as good of opportunity. But I think watch a game with the 1 in a million like we saw yesterday, you lose with coaching innovation and exactly what Sam Mitchell has said. He wasn't able to be as strategically sound as what he would have been if he had a bit more freedom with that.
So you would advocate dropping the 666?
100%.
I cannot believe that you would sit there and say that after the last 25 seconds of that game.
And that was amazing, but you're still going to get results. We still saw great games of football with the old rules.
I agree,
but I think 0.5 of a point we're talking about.
And there's plenty of places where coaches can innovate, and I'm all for it. Everywhere.
They can do it during the week.
I tell you what's happened with 666. The innovation has happened in the centre square with the 4v4 and what they do.
Still a bit of luck.
Whereas I'd like to see the stats, and I haven't looked at it, but I'd like to see the stats on actually how deep centre clearances go. So there might not be the scoring might not be significantly changed, but I reckon you get deeper, more penetrating centre clearances than we used to get with the congestion around the square, and I think that the innovation has happened with that. We see more chains of handball out of centre bounce than we've ever seen before, so I don't mind it. And I think the stand rule has actually been pretty good also.
So kick to inside 50 percentage is up 1%. So from the kick to inside 50 from
a
centre bounce is up 1%.
All right, we're doing it by increments. Better than going backwards.
All right.
Hey, I got a question for you. James Jordan he's had a couple of great jobs and done extremely well. He's the closest that we've got to a Kane Cornes type tagger. But he's getting criticised for
Who's criticising him?
I've heard some criticising for some scragging.
Oh, get stuffed. Who could possibly criticise a disciplined player that is doing such an important role for his team? Now, the only reason he's getting criticised is because
opposition supporters.
Well, that has always been the case. But I even saw Sam Walsh having a sook to the umpire.
A sook?
Yeah, he had a sook to the umpire.
You just think like a tagger, don't you?
He had a sook to the umpire. He went over, and then not long after that, the umpire off the ball paid him a free kick. It is amazing how precious the modern player and midfielder has become because they are so unfamiliar with having any sort of attention. They just expect to roll out there and get 35 every week because they don't have anyone that is actually set for them to limit their influence. And when it does happen, they're like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I better sook to the umpire about getting... No, this is what all of the best midfielders had to deal with for the best part of 50 years prior to probably 5 years ago. I love it. It's having a huge influence on the result. Even what McEntee did to Weddle yesterday and Tom Stewart prior to that, what Long did to Stewart on the weekend. We're getting
them
some
more and more, which I think is awesome. But you know what has had to have changed is the idea of zone defence. And we're still seeing a lot of zone defence, but we're seeing more man-on-man, reference to a man and then defend space after that. I think why that is happening is because coaches are keener to keep specific matchups, whether it's behind the ball or whether it's through the midfield. They're keener to keep specific matchups and have a run with or an accountability type focus. And we're seeing that with the James Jordans, McEntee, as you said. We get players across the league now that you just can't afford to give them time and space.
Ward did Bontempelli, did it very well. I know they didn't get the result, but he's done some good jobs.
Another one on the back of that question. In those contests, in your experience, the first 5 minutes becomes crucial, doesn't it? So did you used to analyse what the umpires were allowing to
speak to them before the game?
And
I used to just put it in their mind to say, just give us a good run. Don't worry about the complaining off the ball from the player. Just make sure you give us a good run.
So
I'd have a bit of a laugh about them.
So when I'm holding his arm and when I'm scragging him off the ball and when I'm tackling him and preventing him from accessing the ball, don't pay those free kicks early. Is that the combo?
Just give us the best one you can do as a run with player is to hold the opposition's wrist because the umpire's looking for arms around or tug of the jumper, but you can actually hold their wrist, which prevents them from lift. So just a little hint there for any run with, hold the wrist.
My favourite was actually grabbing the tagger's wrist, pulling it across, and chopping across the forearm. I said, if you want to put your arm there, you're going to cop it.
Dirty tactics from Bucks this morning. Conversation
and more.